Hey guys, it's Guido. I want to show you what we've been working on. We're 1212 Gaming. This be something a little bit different. I think as a gaming community, you guys might be kind of interested in this. I'm just going to do a little bit of history here with me and my partner for 1212 Gaming. The idea initially, and this was 3 years ago, we were just going to make games because we're gamers and we like doing that. We'd had a career in the Air Force. We both are in the middle of our second career. And on the side, we decided to start 1212 Gaming and start making games. Naturally, the first few games we started looking at had to do with air combat because that's what we know, right? Domain experts on air-to-air combat. I'm still working with air battle managers from the control side. We're both former IPs in the F-15C, so that's what we were interested in. Naturally, that's what we started to do. But as we moved along, and as I started to get more and more familiar with my job in training air battle managers, which are the radar operators and the AWACS controllers, I started to realize, both of us at the same time, and based on what he was doing at JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, creating software and things, we started to kind of realize that, a game is essentially a de facto trainer. You guys know this as gamers. If you start up a game and it doesn't train you how to use it pretty darn quickly, you're probably going to put it down and stop playing it, right? So gamers and game designers have really have really made themselves experts at training without really trying to, because they had to, because they needed their game to be easy enough to understand the concepts and procedures, and it would walk a new player through it so that they got hooked and they loved it and they kept going. So you kind of have a de facto trainer right off the bat as a game. And I thought that was very interesting because I figured, and so did my partner, we got together, started thinking about this a bit, and this is over the years, that there's no reason why gamers and domain knowledge experts in whatever it is can't both get together, and it's really nice if you've got the same person who kind of understands both, and start to create the gamification idea, right? Creating conceptual and procedural trainers, which is what we call them, to leverage training in the margins. And that concept to us, I think, is the big one for the Air Force and for some of any other company that has a large technical training requirement. And I know a lot of you belong to big companies or work for not belong, that's a bad word, but work for big companies. And you've probably done computer-based training, I would imagine a lot of you have. CBTs, whatever the acronym is that your particular company uses. And usually the idea is this is computer-based training that the company needs you, a concept or procedure they need you to understand. And instead of going to a big class or using a person to get everyone together in the same classroom and go over it, you can do the computer-based part of it. Now, a lot of times, the computer-based part is the first thing you do, and then you get together and you do it in a classroom, or then you apply those concepts. But at the most basic level, when they break it down, they're attempting to give you that good baseline of concepts and procedures with the computer-based training. The idea here is to bring this into the tactical training, the tactical aviation training, as well as aviation training for basic aviation training, and they're working on that. But as we sat there and thought about this, the thing I think that we came to, or that we realized that we were missing when we were students at the very beginning, back in the 90s, the mid-90s, is yes, there were computer games and there were things like this around, but they weren't very accessible. So in the legacy system, what happens is you have a class, you're handed a bunch of books, you have a class, and when you're in the syllabus time, meaning the time you go to the squadron or the unit or the school or whatever it is that you're doing technical training-wise, the time you're there, the syllabus is usually pretty well built, and your time management within that is well done. We have a good idea of how long a class takes. We have a good idea of how long it takes you to do this simulator or to do this item or to learn this concept or procedure. But when people go home, right, they're usually handed a stack of books and they're shuffled off home, and it's something to the extent of go home and study and get better. Really? I mean, that really is it, isn't it? We don't have a good way to leverage that time. So our big idea here is not that computer-based training is the future. Clearly, it's that future is here, right? So we're not trying to teach you anything there. But I think that, especially in the case of the Air Force, which is lagged behind in this and some other probably large industries, is that we can leverage extra training time on the student's time, all right, as he wants to, right? The way the student wants to do it. We give him the tools, because right now you don't have those tools. You have the book, right? You go home and That's it. That's what you've got. Let's give them actual tools that they can use in the time and on their terms. On their time and on their term. That's the training and the margins that I'm talking about. The margins are those areas that we haven't leveraged training yet, right? As far as going home and they've got 10 minutes before lunch or 10 minutes before dinner if they've gone home after their training day. And they may want to brush up on some concept or procedure, but they can't, because the only way they can do that now is they got to go all the way back into the squadron or the unit or the company or whatever it is and get to the simulator. And usually there's a lot of barriers to that. Manpower, people have to be there, other contractors, lots of things that you can think of. Why not give them some tools, some conceptual and procedural trainers, lightweight, easily repeatable conceptual and procedural trainers, so that when you're brand new to something, when you're craving repetitions, you can pick that phone up, pick that laptop up, pick that tablet up, and just brush up on whatever that concept and procedure is. And if you're an expert in something, I want you to think back to when you started, when you were not an expert on that thing, and what you wanted to do was get practice, right? You wanted valid repetitions to kind of start to bring those concepts and procedures forward into the mind so that they were a more solid baseline. So when you did go into your unit, your company, whatever it is that you were doing, when you did get there, the concepts and procedures were a solid base for you to work on. And then as your instructor or teacher brought up new concepts, you didn't have to relearn the basics. Now, what we started here with is intercepts. And this started as a game. You can see that we've got the menu. I'm just going to go to TI1 right here. I'm going to go ahead and pause it. I'll give you a tour of what's going on right here as I move these things around a little bit. So this started off as a game. It was an air-to-air combat game. You've got a blue guy, a red guy, and you were going to fly around and shoot the guy. And one of the ideas we had was this was going to be like a radar look right here, the sensor range where you could see guys. And when we first started, the red guy was invisible, and the key was to try to put the red guy into the scan volume of your radar right there, and he would light up, and then you could shoot him. So that was kind of the game. So as we started to talk about this and shift our gears a little bit into this training idea, we realized pretty quickly that there's some concepts and procedures here that student fighter pilots, and air battle managers would be very familiar with, because they're looking at a top-down view. Like I said, you've got a red air and a blue air, and this is the intercept. And if I hit play, it's going in real time. The blue air is doing 446 knots. The red air is doing 505 knots. There's an altitude, and I'll go through all this in just a minute. But starting at a 100-mile setup, there's a certain amount of time, you can do the math on the closure on that, in which you have to make intercept decisions, get into a weapon release point, and all of the myriad of things that you do in an air-to-air intercept. You can actually look at the very basics right here in a very simplistic way that you almost can't break this down into basic of a building block, because when you sit a new guy down or new girl down, new person, they don't know nothing from nothing, right? And until you give them a bunch of repetitions, they're not going to know nothing from nothing. And if you rely only on the FMTs and the live missions to do so, I think you're really leaving a lot of training on the table that you could easily access, training in the margins, by putting it into easily accessible, lightweight, repetitive training devices. And the cool thing about this, one of the cool things about this, is if you consider the way we live our lives right now, and especially the younger generation, but really even the older generation now, just look around at how often they're looking at this thing, right? Their phone. There is a habit pattern already built in of training. People are on these things all the time, checking Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever it is, they're texting, whatever they're doing. And if they get a new app, they're immediately training on it, learning how to use it. They are conditioned to pick up their devices, right? To pick up their technology and to use that technology. So why not start to leverage that a little bit in your technical training, so that when the student sits down, they go, yeah, okay, I got 5 minutes. All right, I remember the Intercept app. Let me just start up the Intercept app. I'm going to run a couple intercepts. I'm going to think about the geometry. Tomorrow I have a ride where I have to do an intercept. So let me kind of remember how that goes and what that looks like. The other powerful thing about it is the sandbox idea. A sandbox is extremely powerful if you can give a student or a person the tools to kind of look at the concept and procedure and allow them to be able to move things around, to run their own intercepts, to make their own mistakes. The learning that happens right there is absolutely amazing. And I can stand up in a classroom and talk to a person about something for hours, and I can explain it to the most minute detail on how exactly I get the blue fighter to intercept the red fighter in a cutoff intercept, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And I can talk about the math, and I can talk about the time, and I can give all of that in exquisite detail. But if I can't show them what it looks like, other than just words and static drawings potentially on a whiteboard, that doesn't mean a whole lot to a lot of people. But once you take that and then you give them a tool to practice that and see what it looks like in time, space, that's where the real learning starts to come in. So I'm going to give you a tour, like I said. Very simple, right? And that's the idea, because one of the limitations to simulation type software and things is learning how to use it. If the tool is too hard to learn how to use for the benefit that it gives, then it's not worth anything. It needs to be simple enough that it trains the concept and procedure, but it doesn't take a bunch of extra time to learn how to use the tool. So this is why, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here. This is why it's so interesting to me when we talk. You hear people get up and they start talking the pie in the sky. AR, VR, machine learning, AI, right? AR, VR, machine learning, AI. That's the blah, blah, blah. That always comes out of people's mouth pretty much immediately. But the question to me is, what the fuck does that mean? What are you going to do with all that stuff? Right? It's great. It's probably the future. It is the future, not probably. And we're going to get there. But what's the application of the technology we have right now? How do we use that now? We'll get to that. That other stuff's on its way, right? And people are developing it, and it's going to be used. But it's always a question of, with technology, not what is the actual top-end possibility. The question is always, how do we use it effectively now? And it's usually a little bit different than the prognosticators say. So, done with that tangent. Quick tour of what I've got here. So we've got start and stop. If I stop, I can actually move these guys around. Sandbox, right? I can move my guys around anywhere I want, and I can start it from any part of the intercept, and I can see what that does to the intercept. Hugely powerful. I can speed up time. So while I'm not going faster, time's going faster, and I can get further along if I need to do that, all right? So stop and start. There we go. North, if I want to futz around and do anything but north up, but that's usually the orientation of a radar scope, so there you have it. If we go down to the bottom left, I can change the altitude and the speed of the target. So I click on the blue one. If I click on the red one, now I'm red 1, right? So I can change the speed and altitude of the target. We'll leave him high and fast, because that'll be part of my example right here. All right, so I've got bullseye right here. So the bearing off of that point, bearing and range. So as my cursor comes out, I'm bearing 142 for 26 miles. This red guy is bearing 104 for 55 miles from bullseye. The blue guy is 293 for 13, just as an example. I can also get a bra. Bearing and range, I can add altitude if I hover over it, obviously. In a lead drag lead kind of idea, which is what the ABMers use when they use their equipment. So they're going to put the cursor right in front. They're going to lead in front of the target. They're going to drag down here and then lead in front of the target again, because they've got about a 12-second refresh rate depending on their radar. And that's a bra of 107 for 65, and the target is, click on them, it's 50,000. But you can also get off the card right here. If you click on it, you're going to get the information here. Blue one, that's his speed, that's his altitude, that's his heading, current heading right there. Same thing for the red. So I'm constantly getting bullseye. I can do a bearing, range, and altitude. Eventually altitude, if I look at that on the aircraft from any point on there. So all useful items and things that a controller would need, and potentially also the pilot as he's trying to learn how to do the intercept right here. This, I'll go ahead and start it. I can pair these things. If I click over here and let go, now I have blue one paired to red one, which means connected via this down here. So it's a 16 right aspect with a 64.7 mile range, and the closer is 1,691 knots. The 1.6 right is the aspect off of the red fighter there, and that's the F-15 standard. It is different via different airframes, but that's what we're using for this one. Here I can reset this whole thing and set it back up, in which case I can go ahead and go back to here, and I can go back to the main, and I can exit if I want. We won't do that, and I go back into the TI-1. So very simplistic, right? Very easy. So what can I do with this? This guy's high and fast. The thing, let's go into a little bit on specifically for this conceptual and procedural trainer, because we're talking about intercepts right here. But this idea isn't just about this one app, okay? This idea is that you take any concept and procedure and you break it down to its most basic building block and you build the app for it, right? So that you can give your trainee as many repetitions on whatever that idea is. It may be that they only use it at the schoolhouse for the time they're in that particular block or that particular class. And that is fine, because what you are attempting to do is build a more solid foundation of understanding of the concepts and procedures. And if you can get them there faster because you're using better training devices, you are leveraging the training in the margins, then good deal if you can discard that app once they get past that knowledge level. And then you can build apps for the next part of the program, or you can add a little bit more complexity onto the app. In an iterative process, you can go almost anywhere. Now, we're not trying to create full mission trainers. That's not the idea. The full mission trainer absolutely has its place, the simulator, the live flight, all of those things. This is in addition to and complementary to those kinds of legacy training ideas. That nothing says that you can't do both, because what we're attempting to do is make them better, faster. We want to left shift the aha moment, that moment when they go, oh, I get it. Now, let me get back to the high fast flyer here after that little sidebar, because what I have found, and I think any professional that's listening to this right now is probably going to be able to identify one type of thing like this in his profession that it drives them crazy that people don't know. And it's probably because they don't get enough repetitions. In air-to-air intercept training, the high fast flyer, a guy that is high and very fast, presents a lot of problems. Because if he's moving at 2 times your speed, it can be very difficult to intercept them and to even get close to those guys. And of course, that's the reason why you're doing Mach snot at 50,000. You're attempting to avoid getting intercepted or shot down. It makes it very difficult. You may be the red's trying to get by the blue air, whatever the case may be. But the thing about being fast is it exacerbates all the other intercept decisions. And one of the things that I have found while training with the ABMs and even with the instructors, because I think they just don't get enough repetitions on this, is that when we get a high fast flyer that's off axis, we have to act very quickly in order to get a decent weapon solution on those guys. Because where I want to be when I shoot at this guy is here. I want to be straight nose to nose, high aspect at the X range. Okay, let me just sidebar slightly on the classification thing. All these numbers are numbers that have nothing to do with any real world numbers. There's no reason why we can't put this behind the secure area that it needs to be. But for your basic concepts and procedures, you don't need the numbers. We're just trying to get the idea of what we're doing with the intercept, all right? So within high fast, this is what we're attempting to do, is get nose to nose on this guy and launch at this range, whatever that range might be, okay? Which means that if we're off axis like this, we have some work to do. And I'm going to actually push him back a little bit back here. If we're off axis, we have some work to do. We need to get from here to here, okay? Now, invariably what happens is, and I've seen this over and over, and it's why I know that these conceptual and procedural trainers will help us get past these kinds of blocks, is what you need here is cutoff, okay? And it's a little bit counterintuitive if I'm just looking at static pictures or if I'm just talking about it. When you say cutoff, you ask doghouse, blue 1, request cutoff. Invariably what you get, and any of my fighter pilot friends who are watching this, okay, and even controllers, are going to immediately know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is, I'm going to start playing this, they're going to tell you to turn to a heading of 107, which is a pure pursuit heading. Now I'm going to speed this thing up because this dude is doing 500. Oops, he's not going fast enough. We got to speed that guy up. Let's do this. There we go. If we do this, I think we can immediately get him to fast. There we go. That is a pure pursuit heading, which means I am never going to get down here in front of this guy. It just isn't going to happen. We'll speed this up. I'll just let you watch this. So if you're a student, and you're trying to figure out, all right, what does this cutoff mean? What's it look like? And the first time you go, okay, I got a high fast, I need to do a cutoff, and you just point at him pretty quickly as you're watching this happen, you probably go, well, this isn't working. Well, I'm never going to get anywhere near this guy. I need to be down here, and I'm going to shoot behind him, right, with my cutoff. So you go, all right, that didn't work. Let's reset this thing. I'll set this back up. Let's reset this thing, and I want cutoff. All right, so I learned that if I just pointed at it, because I actually saw it happen in real time, and because I have control and I can manipulate this scenario, right? I don't have an instructor barking at me. I don't have an instructor sitting up at the front of the room asking me if I know the answer, and all my buddies are around kind of, laughing because I don't. I can go, oh, I saw my mistake. That's interesting. Let's do this. What if I go here? Right? What if I do that? And we'll speed this up. Oh, this is the wrong guy. We'll speed up Mr. Red Air guy, and we'll make him go 1,500 knots. I go, okay, well, that's a little bit more. That looks more like cutoff. Let's see if that works. And that guy is high, and he's speeding up, and well, that's not. That doesn't seem to be working. I can see it happening. I can see it not working. So I go, all right, I'm just going to stop it because I have the power to do so. Okay, hold on. This is not working. Let's reset this thing up. All right, cutoff. So what they told me is the cutoff can often be very significant. So that's what I learned. So cutoff isn't pointing. It isn't just a little bit. What happens if I do this? We'll get this guy going really fast. What happens if I go down here? This should do it, right? Let's check that out. So we'll just speed this up. What happens if I do this for cutoff? Oh, well, that's very interesting, isn't it? So that seems to be working. But man, it's still tough. That intercept's going to be tough no matter what. It really is. But I am going to get a much better, higher aspect solution on this guy than I otherwise would have. And you go, well, it looks like, based on my Blue Air's airspeed and his airspeed, there is a point at which it's not really possible to get where I need to be. And that is as important to know as it is to know the exact perfect answer. And they've learned all of this in this sandbox that they're able to manipulate. And you will notice that as far as ranges and speeds go, that is the actual time. Now I sped it up in time. You could sit there the whole time at the actual 1-for-1 time, and you get a general idea of the amount of time you have to make these decisions. The amount of time you have to make these decisions. And then you can do things like, all right, well, that's interesting. We'll just pause this. What if I don't have a whole lot of offset on this guy? I don't have a whole lot of offset, so we'll just go ahead and speed this guy up. And we'll go to play, and yeah, what if I can just, if I don't have a lot of offset, we'll just speed this up in time-wise just so you don't have to watch too much of it. I probably don't need as much cutoff, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to make this intercept pretty easily. Right? I'm going to make this intercept pretty easily. Back to what I was talking about with the high fast. The reason that that's so important insofar as we're talking about intercepts is that it exacerbates problems like being off axis when they're fast. But the same exact geometric problems happen when you're at relative fighter speeds, that 500 knot regime. So if you can do it with a fast guy giving you trouble, you're going to be able to do it with the slower guys. It's the same concepts. It just isn't as necessary to do the big cutoffs. But the same concepts exist. Just for the last thing, this is scenario number 3, and this happens to be a 2v2. So we've got 2 red, we've got 2 blue air. We'll go ahead and start playing this thing there. And they're coming in a formation that we'd call two groups range, echelon southwest. Sorry, east. Echelon southeast. In this case, then, there's other things you can do with this same program, right? We can do things like targeting plans. You know, you've got a two-ship, you're going to target, someone's going to target the lead group, somebody's going to target the trail group. We can go ahead and set up the app, set up the training device to where we can go ahead and drag, oops, we'll go ahead and get the play going on. We can pair them such as this, and then we can pair this guy such as that, and the app goes, that's correct. That is the correct targeting plan. So we can work targeting plans in here as well. We can work intercepts. For example, as we continue on right here, we've got our two ship. We know that one's going to take on the lead group, and that's blue 1. Blue 2 is going to take on the trail group. At least in the case of some aircraft, you're going to actually do a bit of a float, because what you want to do is maximize the range, between number 2 and the lead group, because he needs to reach around to the trail group. Now, if I just talk about that, on a whiteboard or just blah, say it, you're going to get a lot of nods and people are going to go, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. But then give them the tool to look at it and go, well, what does that look like? What does that look like? How long does it take to develop? How much range does that actually get me? And is there a better way to do it? Because I guarantee you a lot of those students will be going, well, that seems silly. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? Well, as they get into the sandbox and they start to play with how it works, they can go, okay, I get that. That makes sense to me. I am going to stiff arm the lead group with number 2. Number 2 is going to reach around and he's going to take on the trail group. So we've got a Wes by number 1. Oops, messed that up. We've got a Wes for number 1. He points right out there. Excellent. All right, that means he's in the engagement zone. Number 2 is headed down here to the south, and at some point when it's time to target, somewhere around this range here, he needs to come here and bring it nose on. Oh, he's a little bit early. Okay. As either the fighter pilot or as the controller, they're both able to use the same sandbox and play around with what that looks like. I'm telling you, it's powerful. It is powerful, and we will make people much better when we give them the right tools. When we give people the right tools for the training, tools that back up basic concepts and procedures and gives them the ability to manipulate and to visually see that and to make their own mistakes. When we give them those tools, they are going to be much, much better students. They're going to learn faster. They're going to learn higher order concepts faster. They're going to left shift their aha moments. I would imagine seeing some of these pictures in the current legacy system, I guarantee you some of the students probably don't even see that until they're, I don't know how far back into their careers. Never mind the ability to manipulate it and to practice stuff and to figure out what it looks like and why it looks that way. Because they're completely at the mercy of either the FMT or whatever happens during a live event. And with no ability to stop and go, what the heck? Reverse, start again, change where things are. Let's give them the tools. And that's what we're trying to work on, man. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. A lot of this was just me practicing what I wanted to say. I've got to make several videos of this in order to kick that out to AFWorks. Obviously, multiple misspeaks in there, but sometimes that raw, just diarrhea of the mouth is the way to start to get the brain going. Curious what you guys think. I know a lot of you are professionals. A lot of you are technical professionals and have done various things like that. I really think this is a concept, and it's happening in a lot of industries. It's not like I have invented a brand new thing that I think I'm bringing to the world. That's not it at all. The trick, I think, though, the big one is, and this is where I believe this company that I've got going here is a little bit different, or a lot of it different, is the idea that gamers, I think, have a specific knowledge of the idea of this. Because we play games and we get really, really good at the games because we really start to understand the concepts and procedures because we do multiple repetitions. Multiple repetitions. I don't see any reason why we can't take that idea, marry it up to other domain knowledge expertise such as air-to-air combat, which is what I have, or whatever you might have as a technical expert in your career field. Marry those two up, right? So that it's not the cheesy version that we've seen quite a bit, but it's a more professional, specific, laser-focused, conceptual and procedural idea where we're just trying to get people that solid baseline of knowledge and we can work on it from there. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. That's all I've got for today. Thanks for listening to the ramble. I think I'm going to make this is an executable already. The plan is to make this actually available on our website. I'll let you guys know when we get it there. It's not much. It's not a very big download, and you can actually play it and goof around with it. And I would be interested in your feedback, both through the UI and just the whole concept. So let me know, guys. Thanks for coming by. I appreciate it. Later.